The following opinions expressed in this program are that of Noah Waterman and do not reflect those of any other
Guys, that can't be right. Can we try that again?
The following opinions expressed in this program are that of Noah Waterman, his guest. This is the best game of all time.
I feel good. Friends and folks, welcome to the Kaiju Lounge. I'm your boss monster, Noah Waterman, and excuse the mess behind me, those of you who are watching the video version of this. I'm about to go on a trip. I've had some things come in, a little bit of rearranging, so this happens regularly. I just need to clean my office better. That's fine. That's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is this. The thing you're listening to, or if you're on YouTube watching, it's an intro to my new podcast. Why not? Let's try something a little bit different. I had an idea for a podcast, and this is my foray into an audio first medium. So, welcome to episode 1 of the best game of all time. Yes, it is an ambitious title. Yes, it is an ambitious project, but if anyone can do it, well, it'd be probably somebody of note. But if anyone can secondly do it, it would be me. So what is the best game of all time? Let's get into that, right? This is a podcast. This is the podcast. This is the definitive podcast to finally answer the age-old question, what video game is the best game of all time? The idea is I myself, with some friends, occasional guests, depending on who I get and how successful we go, talk about gaming. And not just talking about gaming, but truly attempt to rank every game ever made. It is, nothing is off limits. One day could be mobile games. The next could be the Switch. The next could be Atari 2600. The idea is to run the gamut. Nothing is off limits. The only thing is that we need to end up with a definitive answer. What game is the best game of all time, right? I get tired of review shows and things where it's like, oh, this game's a 4 out of 5. Like the other 200 games are 4s out of 5s. No. Everything has to be either better or worse. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to do. Reviews are bullshit. This is the true answer. So this is how it's going to work. Myself and a panel of unqualified reviewers are going to basically play various games between episodes with the attempt to review it to the best of our abilities. Eventually, during the episode, we will talk about it, say what we like, what we didn't like, often compare games to each other, but we will end up giving a score, an individual ranking between 0 and 10 that we can only use once in perpetuity, meaning in the history of this podcast, in the history of that guest being on this podcast, should they be repeat guests, we can only ever use that score once. If I give Packy and Marlin for Super Nintendo, say, a deserved 9.5, I could only ever use that 9.5 then, meaning that any game in the future, if I think it's nearly as good, must be a 9.4 or a 9.6 or a 9.51 or a 9.430284. The numbers are infinite for sure, but you can only ever say a game is better or worse than another game. Sounds simple. Sounds fun. So let's get into it. I'll let you guys know right now, this first episode's a little longer than intended because basically we review 10 games. We're probably never going to do 10 games again. That was insane. But we do 10 games in order to build the skeleton, the baseline of this list, so that future episodes actually have something to compare to and not like our first episode, we did one game. That's short. The next time Now there's 2 games on the list. No, we want to begin with something substantial. I would say that if, let us know your thoughts in both a review on your favorite podcast app to let us know how you feel there and help us with the algorithm. Or if you're watching the video version on YouTube, you do it there and give us the likes and the comments and all the fantastic stuff that, every person so desperately needs for self-validation. So, all that said, all that out of the way, probably the longest intro because future episodes I don't need to explain shit. But we hope you enjoy this first episode of the best game of all time. Check it out. So I sent you guys the run of show, more or less, of how it's loosely structured. And I use loosely in and of itself pretty loosely. It's all meant to be just casual conversation with the point that whatever happens in the end, we have officially and fully ranked in perpetuity from here forever these 10 games in order from best to worst, which means that anything that it ends up is your official opinion. You cannot dispute that. It is legal, can hold up in court. This is 100%. If it ends up something you don't like, it doesn't matter. You were on this episode, and that is officially your stance.
I shouldn't have signed all those forms. Yeah.
I think it's only it adds to the pressure. That's the drama.
Oh God! All right, I need to think about how I'm gonna list all these games.
What do you think about it? Because I'm going to give a structure that allows you to do that. It's not going to be just the list itself, but in the meantime, before we get to that, we're already recording. I have everyone on record. You've all shown me your IDs and showed me you're over 18, so we're fine there. So welcome.
I'm actually doing a Tracy Lord sort of situation. I'm actually 16 recording it.
Oh, well, gotta delete that. Damn. All right.
The reference alone lets you know that I'm underage. Anyway, sorry.
Well, guys, welcome to the hunt for the best game of all time. We're going to go ahead and kick things off, guys. Our panel right now are my former roommates, my college chums, people who I've spent probably more time talking about video games with than anyone else combined. Allow me to introduce to you Michael Petrocelli, Patrick Pat Molloy, and Lewie Thomas. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Hey.
You didn't take the easy swing of Louie.
Nope.
Oh.
Can't do that. That is a song that is copywritten and we can get in trouble. So I got to protect myself. That's how we're getting bleeped. Guys, thank you for embarking with me on this perilous journey, this hunt, if you will, to discover the best game of all time.
I'm honored to be included.
Now,
Truly.
before we discuss the games, we got a lot here. This is the exception to prove the rule. We normally wouldn't do this. We're going to be ranking 10 games to create the framework of what will be the greatest list of all time. First, I want to do a little segment of getting to know our panelists. Now, the plan is for this to be a question. We either ask the whole group or we ask maybe one person in particular. Say, Michael Petrocelli. Tro, is it true that sometimes you get motion sickness from certain video games? Talk to me about that.
It is true. I was going to save it for our conversation about one of these games, but yes, first-person games do make me motion sick. I have literally bought Dramamine to try to play certain games or used other substances to try to alleviate nausea to get through certain games that I really like that still make me sick. But yeah, first-person games are tough for me. It's just, since I was a kid, it's always been the case.
So my question to you is, on this list, what got you more sick, GoldenEye or Nights into Dreams?
I would still say Goldeneye.
Really?
I had other feelings about Knights, but I'll wait till we're actually talking about that. But actual sickness, no. Colors overload and things like that don't bother me. It's a lot of the motion stuff. And all I'll say right now is that the exact same point I used to get motion sick in Goldeneye when I was a kid, I got sick again as an adult. So we'll cover that when we get to that game.
Which point was that?
Whenever you get to like the surface single player level, because I was playing the single player campaign, as a kid, I always got sick then. I think the frame rate was slow enough in multiplayer that it never bothered me too much. but in single player,
The slowdown was so strong that it kept you from fully vomiting amongst your friends.
First person slideshows don't make me sick.
Oh man, I really want to put you in a VR helmet, Michael.
I don't want to do it.
No,
Let me rephrase that. I would love to do VR. It sounds very interesting. There are some games I'm curious about. I just know my inner ear will like rebel, and it'll be bad.
They have added various functions and options to make that a little bit easier. I will say, like things like tunnel vision, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could just go full immersion extreme and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to trying it. I'm worried about the result.
We'll have to film it.
Sure.
Well, with that said, let's jump in. Now, normally we would probably take some time to talk about the game, talk about the overall experience, the story. We don't have time for that. It's 10 games. They are E.T. for the Atari 2600, Duck Hunt for the NES, Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega Genesis, Super Mario World for Super Nintendo, Nights into Dreams for Saturn, Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the PlayStation, GoldenEye for the N64, Crazy Taxi for the Dreamcast, God of War for PS2, and WarioWare Mega Party Games for the GameCube. So we're going to kind of talk about all at once. I think some probably have stronger opinions on some games than others. Before we go into that part, were there any of these games before me asking you to do this with me that you hadn't played yet?
Well, for
E.T.
me,
Any of you?
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, I don't know why everyone's been quiet. I assume
I
you
was
don't want to talk.
talking a lot before, so I was giving that a chance.
That was nice of you.
No,
Yeah, E.T. I'd never played E.T.
E.T. was the main one.
Yeah.
Louis?
yeah, I'd never played Nights into Dreams until yesterday, and without giving too much away, I was fine. Without having to, my life does not feel any more complete. Having experienced that game.
Yeah, I would say E.T. and Knights were the two. Let me just look at the list again. Were the two I definitely had never played before. And it was certainly something.
Great. So let's go to that. So you two both hadn't played Knights before. I actually hadn't played Knights before until I started playing for this one. Pat, you're the only one with experience who had played it. I want to get your thoughts on this game first, because even in talking before doing this podcast with everybody, it seems like no matter what the opinions were, everyone had strong opinions. Pat, let me get yours first.
I mean, Nights into Dreams was a game that I played on demo at Sears around the corner from my house obsessively when the Sega Saturn was on display. And as a kid, that and Panzer Dragoon stood out a lot as like, I was blown away by the 3D aspect of those games, like the ability to move around in space I don't think the demo setup had the fucking analog stick. Wait, are we cussing in this?
We're cussing. It's fine. It's fine.
All right, good. It's fucking fine.
That's too much. Don't do that.
Shit. Sorry.
No,
but yeah, either. the ability to like operate in 3D space and like do the like loops and stuff was really interesting. So I remember having a very warm memory of it as a kid and thinking that it was like bending the rules that I had understood games to have previously.
Gotcha. Louis Tro, why was young Pat wrong?
So I'm going to probably be doing a lot of why Patrick is wrong or was wrong, but I'll start by saying where he was right. Like that like Sears bump, that like demo that had there was like a real thing, because like there are so many games that like have stayed in my brain because of Sears. I remember Glover was one that they had a demo
I
out
knew
at
that.
Sears that I wish I would have played before I bought the game. What was the one for the PlayStation with, was it Tomba? That was like the caveman and it
Yes.
had like
Yeah,
Yes.
Tombo
all
was
that.
that one.
Like that was like
Tomba
those games-
exclamation mark, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Like those
Trying to keep the levels even, so I wasn't.
Yeah.
the exclamation.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we won't express things. We'll just say what the punctuation needs to be on it. So we're not redlining. But like yeah, like all of those things, like as a kid, like those fully stayed with me. And having not played Knights, I remembered like what the cover looked like. I remember what the game was, even though I never touched it, which is probably why I was so supremely disappointed.
Very fair. As you were when you got Glover 64 as a child.
Yeah, I mean those commercials made Glover really good because I really wanted it. But I'm glad my mom was wise enough to not buy it based on my whims.
I mean, I will say the game is distinct in its art style, right? Like it does something that a lot of games I think at the time don't do, which is have a style that feels timeless. And I only see it as timeless because there's that game that Sonic Team came out with recently, Balan Wonderland, that is basically the exact same art style and was also incredibly disappointing.
Oh yes,
Weirdly
everybody
similar.
hated that.
Yeah, I played the demo a little bit. Well, anyway, we're not talking about that.
But yeah,
I
Troy,
will
you
say
had
that-
your
Yeah, I so like, I wasn't a Saturn kid at all, and I never played it in the store, but I will say one of my notes is certainly an original idea, if nothing else, which is fair. Like you can't deny like it's a singular vision. I can see why, especially as a showcase for like 3D control, the flying around at the very least feels good on the analog stick, and I'm sure it was still kind of interesting even if you were stuck playing it on D-pad. And also, I think, Pat, to your point, as you as a kid, seeing a game in 3D was really something special in like the mid 90s. Like that was brand new. We hadn't experienced it. Like, this game's not on the panel, but I remember going to my friend's house and seeing Super Mario 64 for the first time. Like that, those experiences were all so interesting that I think, it didn't matter how maybe incomprehensible the game itself was. It was just experiencing that new dimension.
Yeah.
That was exciting.
Yeah. I mean, and again, another Sega Saturn title at the time, Resident Evil. I don't know if you've like gone back and watched videos of the Sega Saturn Resident Evil.
I haven't.
It's very chunky, but as a little kid, I remember thinking it was scary. Like this like formless green blob with like little red sprinkles. Yeah.
Yeah, it
One
still
second,
did.
I'll be
Like
right back.
nothing had looked so real, even though now looking back, that seems crazy. But
Right.
like, yeah, borderline incomprehensible is my basic first take on Knights for sure.
Yeah. Although if I could push back, part of me feels like Knights was just Sonic without walls. Like which like, and not to get too hot too early, but Sonic also a game I don't love. Like the idea of like a platformer that's just kinetic motion, like get that out of my face.
Also, Sonic 1 also in particular, but yeah, we'll get to it.
Well, no, I mean, let's talk because this is free form. We're talking about all the games on the list right now, and like I will say, I felt the same way. My first thought, because I think I played Sonic and Knights in the same night, and my biggest issue was kind of realizing how the Sonic team, as a company or as a developer, handles movement, in that it's too fluid for anyone to have full control. And this goes into current Sonic games where you just don't stop. And when you move, you always go like 10 extra frames. You're always kind of, everything feels like what happens when Mario Kart 64, you start to lose control on a banana peel and you have like 3 seconds to get it right again. That's the entirety of movement in any Sonic Team game. And it drives me nuts. Followed by, I was talking with Pat, I was talking with you about this the other night, is like the fact that by the second level, they are already asking you to stop. The main gameplay mechanic of level 2 is stop and hang out here while this thing moves slowly for you. The antithesis of any Sonic game I could possibly think of.
That's my huge beef, especially with Sonic 1. All Sonic games have this problem where they're front-loaded. The first level is usually like a showcase for how fast and exciting it can be. And then somewhere along the line, they realize it has to be challenging and they run into a problem. But Sonic 1 is particularly egregious in the sense that like Green Hill Zone is like, you know, whatever you think of the color palette and like how fast it goes, at least the level design is mostly designed around it being fast. And
Right.
like, you know, and you can have a good time with it. But then as soon as you get to Marble Zone, everything
It's
like
precision
screeches to a halt.
platforming.
Right, which is not designed for. And then for the rest of Sonic 1, I got to Labyrinth Zone and then I said, I can't fucking do this anymore. But like that was as far as I could get. And like
How far did you get?
Labyrinth Zone, which is the water level. Like I bailed. I couldn't do it. And I love like I will defend Sonic 2, the one I grew up playing with friends who had Genesis. Like that one at least sustains to some degree that kind of like level design that's based around being fast a lot more. Sonic 1, it feels like maybe they did Green Hill and then worried the game was going to be too easy. And so then, and all they knew how to do was make like a subpar Mario platformer. And so then, but it still had Sonic controls. And it's just, it's
I
laborious.
can
It's
see
not fun at all.
opinions forming in Pat's head. As
I mean,
you're
the
talking
crazy
right
thing is,
now.
the crazy thing is about Sonic 1 is that if, like you were just saying, if you grew up playing Sonic 2 and you go back to Sonic 1, it's mind-blowing that you don't have the down spin feature in Sonic 1.
Yeah.
So I mean, I definitely had the false memory later in life that like the original Sonic had that, and then going back and you realize you just have to run and push down to start rolling. Like it's,
what's the effect where like you misremember thing where like everyone in the world collectively
The Mandela
misremember
effect.
something?
Oh,
Yeah. It's
Yep.
it's exactly that. It's not realizing it was Diddy's Conquest and not Diddy Kong's Quest, and not realizing that the downspin isn't in Sonic 1. Like
Also got that I can't play the original Mega Man for that like same reason where I was like, oh, core mechanics that I attribute to all the games just aren't in this first one. So
yes.
Yep.
Although what's funny, Pat, is if you play because I played both like a version of the original Sonic 1 on the Genesis collection, and then also the iOS version, which is like a remastered version that's in widescreen, and they put the spin dash back in it.
Of course they did.
And so it's actually, I had to like try to make myself not use it while I was playing that version to try to simulate the original experience, but it's hard to not if you know you can.
Yeah. I mean, I liked, it's funny, like I think back a lot of times to how I played video games when I was a kid, and I don't remember often getting far beyond like the first few levels. And I know Sonic 1 was a game that I played a lot and probably was just okay with like seeing motion blur and like goofing around and occasionally trying to like find a secret path or something like that.
Right.
And just like being like okay with that. Like it was
that ties into kind of like a point that I thought of playing Sonic 1 and Super Mario World to bring that into the fold, was because those games were Sonic and Mario were pitted against each other. And I feel like if you sat a kid down in the early 90s and showed them the first level of Sonic the Hedgehog and the first level of Super Mario World, they would pick Sonic every time because it was fast, it was like colorful and bright, like all that stuff. Super Mario World is an infinitely better game, but it gets off to a pretty slow start and kind of eases you into the mechanics a lot more. And so I can see, even though I don't like the original Sonic the Hedgehog, I can see why in the early 90s, like that was the hot thing to get if you were a kid.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever told it. I mean, I probably have told you this story. When I was a kid, I wanted a Sega Genesis. And I told my mother I wanted a Sega Genesis. Like that was all that I wanted for Christmas that year. I like wrote a letter to Santa that I wanted a Sega Genesis. She went to the Babbage's in the mall and was about to buy a Sega Genesis, and the like pimply faced teenager was like, your son doesn't want a Sega Genesis. The better system is Super Nintendo. And I, on Christmas morning, open up a rectangular shaped package that I think is a Sega Genesis, and it's a Super Nintendo. And I was at least good enough that I opened it up and I was like, oh, okay. And like my mother was like, what's the matter? And I was like, well, I asked Santa for a Sega, but this is good. And she was like, yeah, well, maybe Santa thought this one was better or something like that. And I was just like, yeah, okay. And then I had a Super Nintendo.
Lewie, to circle back to an earlier point, why was young Pat wrong?
Listen, you couldn't plug headphones into a Super Nintendo.
Why would I want to?
Yeah, you wanted to
What
hear that
headphones are long
twang
enough to
real
make
loud.
that worthwhile?
Yeah.
I sat 10 inches from the screen. I don't know about you.
Oh God, I definitely did when I was playing Duck Hunt. I think otherwise though, I gave myself about the distance of the wires.
Right.
You just
You
cheated
were-
at
it was
Duck Hunt.
impossible. It was impossible to play Duck Hunt if you didn't hold the gun right up. to
Yeah,
the
you
screen.
Yeah.
can't explain the concept of looking down sights to a child, nor should you.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know
you
what
know,
parents
tough
is doing
streets,
that.
you know.
Yeah, right.
Did you were any of you ever kids that either knew or like found out or had another kid tell you about the light bulb trick for Duck Hunt?
Yes.
No.
That was the only way I could get past. Like I don't remember what point I always got stuck at, but it was like I couldn't get to whatever the end screen is for Duck Hunt for sure because that was just they start going so fast.
Right. As an adult, I don't know. What is the light bulb trick?
Oh well, okay. The light bulb trick is just the way that the light gun works. Is it's aimed at the screen, and it notices a white square that like reflects into the. It's a tiny camera essentially, right?
Yeah.
Like, or
Yeah.
a very simple. Yeah.
So the gun itself is a very, very small, like directional camera in the barrel. So what's happening is when you hit the trigger, the entire screen goes black, except for where the duck is goes white. And if the camera captures that white, then it registers a shot, like you hit the duck. If it captures black, then it doesn't register anything. So that's basically how you're able to get into that sort of technology of getting it to be as accurate as it was.
Yeah. And then if you just aimed the light gun at a light bulb and clicked it a bunch of times, it would register as a shot and you would win. And then did you know that you could plug in a second controller and control the ducks?
That I did.
Did know that.
That was an absolute favorite thing of mine. Like to have like basically a 2-player Duck Hunt experience of having one person control the duck and the other person shoot.
The idea of cheating in Duck Hunt feels so wild to me in a way where it's like there's no story, like there's not not a reason to cheat to get further. Like
You didn't want that dog to laugh at you.
But on the flip side, the idea of playing Duck Hunt as a versus game, the idea of like a versus party game or something, it's like, all right, that I know that wasn't worked in. You were just controlling the ducks and there was no duck win state, but like that could be a lot of fun. It only takes a little extra coding to turn that into a versus game and have that be a party mode in like a new Mario Party or something.
Oh yeah, I really loved that. Also, just as a side note, because I have a VR headset, I've been like messing around with more, like looking into other VR games. Somebody released a game called Duck Season, where the whole point is that you play Duck Hunt, but it's VR. You're sucked into the television as a young child. You can just shoot ducks and everything's fine. Or if you shoot the dog in the game, he then basically like Five Nights at Freddy's comes out of the game to like hunt you.
I started seeing this. I didn't know what this was.
Yeah,
I just saw random clips of something that looks very similar to what you're describing. Holy crap.
Yep. It's called Duck Season. It's only for PC VR, so I won't be able to play it anytime soon. So I just watched a YouTube video of the endings, but it looks phenomenal. There was like a very good tech demo for the game, and it really like it very much brought up the idea of like Duck Hunt and shooting the fucking dog when you're a kid. Like,
amazing.
Also, no one's racing to remake that clay pigeon shooting mode. Right? Nobody remembers that.
I forgot that was a mode until I turned the game on recently.
As a kid that didn't understand how the game worked, I played that one a lot more because the clay like disc like went on a trajectory, and I was like, I can understand this as a kid. I was like, so maybe I can get better. The ducks were unpredictable, and that frustrated me, and the dog didn't help. So like, being like, I can maybe work on this more boring thing and get better at it, and I never really did. Maybe I think I could take like one step away from the screen instead of having like the gun like. But like, so I use that mode a lot when I
didn't think about the trajectory, but that is a very good point. That they are easier to predict.
That's interesting. So what other strong opinions on this list do people have? What games stood out as like excellent or horribly awful?
I mean, go ahead, Louis.
Oh, well, I wanted to touch back real quick on how Sonic's not a great game. But to parlay that into Mario, into Super Mario World, because I think there's two interesting things. To Petro's point about the idea, like if you're a kid and like you play both of those first levels, like which one's gonna grab you more? Like correct, but I'd wonder if like kids today, because like today, that Mario model is built into pretty much every game where you have to expect to like sink an hour into the game before things are going to get good. You're expected to be taught the game at this point in time. So like that as something that is more like mature and finished in a way that like Sonic doesn't. And Knights have that same problem of just throwing you into a concept.
Knights is even worse. And that's a big thing for me too, is like games that teach you how to play them. Like literally when I played Knights, I had to go into the menu and read the 17-page manual because I started to play and I was like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I don't understand. I turned back into a kid at one point, which is literally the worst. I couldn't beat a single boss because I couldn't figure it out before the timer ran out. Like all of it was bad. And like, yeah, Sonic is at least simple enough that you can kind of muddle through, but you're right in terms of like a game that teaches you its mechanics. Like Mario does that, and that is definitely learning a game is more of an expectation now than I think it used to be. And I think part of it is maybe because you had an instruction book before that used to come with games. Yeah. And so some of the expectation was that you would read that.
And the instruction booklet was just like what told you the storyline too. Like unless you got like a couple of lines of like, text at the beginning to tell you some stuff, that was basically your entire introduction to like what was happening and what you were supposed to be doing.
So I will say though, that like that was actually pretty standard in most Mario games in general, though. I look at World 1-1 and the original Nintendo. It's like Miyamoto has a game design philosophy that's built around that level of like, hey, the first level you learn by just pressing buttons and interacting with things around you. And yeah, to your point, it's like Knights definitely doesn't do that. Sonic really doesn't do that. You start moving, you're going so fast, you feel like you miss. That first level is like 50% airtime.
Yeah, not to keep dunking on Sonic the Hedgehog, but the thing about that game is that it teaches you incorrect information about how the rest of that game will be played, because the rest of the game doesn't, at least, I mean, up until when I failed, maybe the later levels course correct, but it doesn't play like Green Hill Zone. At the very least, if you get through Green Hill, you're like, okay, there's one button, you jump, you go really fast. I'm like starting to get a handle on it, and then the rest of the game doesn't use that information at all. It's just okay. No, you're just jumping on platforms.
So what's your guys' opinion on a game that absolutely doesn't do that, and that's built into the design philosophy of the game? WarioWare. WarioWare is on purpose not telling you how to play. It is literally a game of Twitch. I got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do in that spot, and might actually be one of my favorite games on this list.
Well, so I would say like WarioWare does like, it's interesting because right in a certain way it gets to like the quintessence of like what a game is, like by just giving you purely gameplay, no story, like it's just outside of I flipped open my phone and I've got a fever, and then like that's all the story you're getting to like go into a thing. But like it does something that none of these other, I think, games that have very poor designs can do, where it can give you so much variety that it doesn't matter, right? It's like sketch comedy of video games. Some of it's going to hit well, some of it's not, and it doesn't matter. Like if it's good or bad, like what you're there for is the variety. It's not something like Sonic where they had one good idea, or every Battletoads game where the first level is the best level. And then like what they hit you with is sort of variety, but none of it ever works. Like it's all smart and like it's fast, it's inoffensive enough that like, even if there's a couple games that are the same, like it doesn't matter, right? Like hitting you with like that huge mix and that randomness is like the whole point of how the game functions. And like obviously something that couldn't have happened back in the day, but smart that it did. I also agree. Like I'm not entirely sure where I'm ranking it, but it goes high on my list for being a completely original idea that like takes history and does something better with it than recycles like trash games.
I do think that like WarioWare, I really only ever, I enjoyed playing that with people who were enjoying playing it. Like I feel like that's a game that very much depends on being in a like party situation where other people are having a fun time doing it as well.
Right, and I think what's interesting too is particularly about the WarioWare game that's in consideration is it's kind of the only WarioWare game that doesn't have like a gimmick around it outside of its own. That like it, it's basically just a multiplayer version of the original game, which was a Game Boy Advance game. And I think Louis, it's a good point in the sense that like it is a game kind of that teaches you how to play it in the sense that it's like you have 5 seconds, like press this button now, and then like that's
Right.
it, and that's okay, and then you quickly pick up on like the vibe of it. I I'm not sure where it goes on my list only because I think to Patrick's point, it depends very heavily on the atmosphere and kind of which you're playing it. But that's also what it was made for, so I'm feeling a little torn on that. But it is maybe my favorite WarioWare for the record. Like I actually like
Yeah.
I like the original style WarioWare better than any of its. I understand why it went in the direction of like, okay, for the Wii, we're gonna do motion controls, we're gonna do the tilt one, we're gonna do the new one where it's like the character-based controls. Like I understand why I went in that direction, but I think I like the original model the best.
Have you played the Switch one yet? I have
Only the
not.
demo.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I have it, and
Mhm.
it's a lot of fun. Just to go into briefly, my only issue, and it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, is the accessibility bar is so low. Like if my favorite thing about the WarioWare games is playing with people, because each character has their own controls. If you try to get somebody who hasn't played before to play with you, you are going to womp them. And there's this, you're going to, because you have played through the game. You know how each character moves. There is no, unless you sit them down and do the tutorials for all 20 something characters, which is all right. Now you're wasting a half hour, 45 minutes before you get into the actual thing you want to do with your friend. Like it just becomes a little tough. It's contingent on how the knowledge is of everyone else, which kind of ruins the point of what we're saying we like about this WarioWare here, is that it is pick up and play. The fact that it is so chaotic is the first thing you learn. It is the tutorial is throwing you to the fire.
Yeah, I think a lot about like when I was growing up, like sometimes my sister, like my stepdad would play games with me, but for the most part I played them by myself. My mom got Mario Party, and because there were four of us in the house, she like begrudgingly sat down and played that with us. Like for the first time, was like, okay, like I don't know what I'm doing. And she ended up winning the first time that any of us had played it. And then she was like, oh, I love this game, mostly because like she beat her like children. Wait for you, Jill. Hope you feel good. But there was Mario Party, obviously a little bit slower, but there was like something when that came out about it being like almost like chaotically democratic, right? And how you don't have to know how to play video games to understand like that core concept. And there is something that I like about that with WarioWare, where people that truly don't know much about playing games, but know their directions and know the one button that they need to press, can maybe like instinctually figure it out.
Oh yeah.
That again, I think makes it so different than literally any other game on this list, where it is something that you have to learn. Like it runs counter to all of that.
That's true, because like I will say something I noticed with Goldeneye, which was kind of the other party game stalwart that we have on here, is how generous the aim assist is, which I kind of forgot about. Like but also like it would be a nightmare to play if it didn't have that. And so like there is, because it exists in this weird middle space between kind of like super simplistic first person shooters like Doom or Wolfenstein, and then like once the genre got a little more involved with Half-Life the next year, like I think came out the year after Goldeneye, like it kind of exists in this space where it can still emulate that simplicity to some degree. Like if you're playing multiplayer Goldeneye, it doesn't have the same entry level appeal as WarioWare for sure, right? It's an inherently more complicated style of game, but I actually don't think it's that much more complicated once you know what the buttons are, because all you really have to do is find the other person and hit the trigger fast enough to kill them.
I mean, that's why I like proximity mines the most. It added a layer of everybody's on the same ground.
I feel the same about slappers. Slappers only, baby.
The wealth of options certainly helps.
Yeah, license to kill slappers only was definitely a good one.
But I think what makes both of them strong party games is that idea of kind of like entry level. Like the whole point of a party game is that you don't need to teach the other person that much about playing it. And I think both of them have this trait. And I think maybe a couple of folks on here probably feel more strongly about WarioWare as being the top contender, and I understand that. But I think both of them do have that quality.
I also loved GoldenEye's single player. Like I had it at home, and like that was another game where I felt like I've definitely played the game before I watched the movie. And
Oh,
like
yeah. I've never seen the movie still.
It's weird to
yeah.
watch if you've played the game.
Yeah,
So
I was
will
like
say.
so familiar with what the game was and like how each level worked and like that. Yeah, you know, you watch the movie. I can't even fully remember what the statue yard in the movie is, the like statue graveyard or whatever. But in the game, it was such a unique experience, like hunting through and stuff like that.
So I tried to play the story mode recently because I realized I'd only ever played multiplayer, and I was thoroughly unimpressed. I found and I think part of it was the control scheme, because let's face it, all 64 first-person shooters had one joystick, which means that your look options were the C buttons, which sounds like a nightmare, and trying to precision aim that way is tough. But yeah, I felt like I was like wandering aimlessly around an open yard in every scenario, just kind of like shooting who I run into. It felt so much. It felt like it's funny that was the main thing, and multiplayer was initially an afterthought by the developers, because it feels the other way around.
I mean, I would like challenge myself to do the speed run. You unlocked the cheat codes by beating the single player like within like certain amounts of time or doing special things or whatever. So I pushed myself to play the single player better and better so that I could have a better party experience when friends came over.
So is that self-inflicted fun, or is that fun from the game?
I mean, it's fun from the game because I love unlocking things. Like I'm obsessed with getting like different outfits and shit in games, and I really pushed myself. It was probably one of my first experiences with that like craving need to unlock things inside of a game.
Well, and I will say too, so Noah, when you did it, like I don't know what difficulty level you were like doing the levels at. There is a weird thing where it's like in the higher difficulty levels, there are additional objectives that I think actually make some of the levels make more sense, because sometimes what they do is just cut out one of them, and it's like very difficult to be like, wait, like what do I do now, or where do I need to go? But I think one of the interesting things about the single player, granted, once you know how it works and like and what you need to do, is that like you can still do those objectives even if they're not there, or you can do them out of turn and sometimes they still work. And like in a very like sloppy and clunky way, Goldeneye like has this feel that's kind of open world, or that you can sort of do anything you want to. I think in a way that like Skyrim is still a game that resonates despite the fact there are bigger and more open world games. Like Skyrim still feels like the game where you can truly do whatever you want to, like in a very controlled way. Goldeneye sort of feels like once you like interact with it, you can do whatever you want to there, and maybe it will or like won't work. And like, granted, if you don't know like how the system in the universe works, it doesn't translate or make sense. This is also though during a time when like Brady's guides were a thing. So like if you were really getting into it, you also probably like
if you were into it, you had that thing down, right?
Exactly. Yeah, or game facts, right? Like, so it's like you knew like what it was you needed to do, and then you could just go out there and explore it yourself.
Right.
Like, and I think,
real quick,
completely agree. Oh, go ahead.
I was say before, because we still have two more games to even touch on before I think we get into the ranking stuff. I want to go to those real fast. God of War and Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
And I think
Crazy
those Taxi, right?
Oh, and Crazy Taxi.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or in the words of Offspring, yeah.
It's Crazy Taxi. So, I mean, I guess quick thoughts all around on all three games. Was there ones that stood out more than the other two on this one? I know, Tro, you and I will talk to the cows come home about every Metroidvania ever, and I think it's hard to even, hard not to pray to the altar that is Castlevania Symphony of the Night when you even think of those other games.
Right. I mean, it's literally, it's why that genre is been called what it is. Although I think now people are trying to make search action a thing, but Metroidvania is still the colloquial term. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds like bullshit to me, man.
Search action. I didn't come up with it, but it's literally the game that put Vania in Metroidvania, because that's
otherwise it'd just be called Metroid.
Right, or Metroid-like or something. But like that's the first one of the series that adopted that structure. And yeah, I mean, it's a game I came to late because I didn't have a PlayStation growing up, but I definitely would have loved if I had. And so I actually played the Game Boy Advance games that were inspired by it first, and then went back once I had access to I got like a PS2 and bought some old PlayStation games, including Symphony of the Night. And it's I, I have a hard time placing it in terms of like the pantheon of like Metroidvania games of where I think it belongs to, because I think it has some glaring issues, particularly once you get to the Upside Down Castle and like the latter part of the game, which I think is kind of the worst part, even though it's the end part of the game. I think I think it does an interesting thing where it kind of opens it's fully open and you have to like go and find the 5 pieces of Dracula or whatever, and it's kind of neat that it's a secret part of the latter the game that you can easily miss if you don't know how to get it. But it's annoying to traverse, and all the enemies are really powerful, so you kind of can't ignore them. And I don't know, that's in replays of the game, that's always where my playthrough starts to lose steam, is when I get to that last part. And honestly, like the build up to the end should be where I feel momentum to like get to that final battle.
Fair enough. I disagree completely, but that's fair enough.
Fair enough. But it's a great game. I don't like that's more me trying to pick out something that I find to be a flaw. I think there's like so much about that is so well done.
I want to say, like, similar to Petro, like I had an experience with it where like I didn't play it as it came out and only later, and it was very much like watching like a movie that people tell you is like very influential to cinema, right? Where it's like I saw all these things that I've like loved in other games like since then, and maybe they've been employed a little bit better, in them, but like playing through Symphony of the Night and being like, oh, okay, this is like the one that really like formed a lot of like made these things important, is like interesting, right? And so like in that same way where it's like Citizen Kane's not my favorite movie, but like I can be like, oh, that's cool that like so many things that other people did in ways that I like more down the line are like in there, is like very much how I feel about Symphony.
Actually,
yeah,
I have a great jump to God of War from that comment, because in the same way that you could go back and see things that you've loved in other games and where they originated from in the Castlevania Symphony of the Night, I fucking hate QuickTime events, and I largely blame God of War for making them so popular.
It's mostly God of War's fault.
It is, and
Yeah.
otherwise the game is great, and I really loved the combat, and I enjoyed playing the game, and I thought the storyline was like way overblown, but like in a kind of fun way. But I hate QuickTime events, and I blame it. If you told me that we could completely wipe out God of War from like the annals of history, and it meant that there were no QuickTime events in video games, I think I'd take that deal.
Wow.
That's legit. I mean, I like, call me old fashioned, but like if I'm at a cutscene, like I kind of want to put down a controller.
Yes.
I was like, great, this is going to be a moment for me to rest and like really just like watch a thing instead of actively having to participate in it. And I'm sure there are people that feel differently and want to feel like every part of the game is them like also playing and controlling it. But like, cinematic scenes are there for a reason, right? Like, it's not, again, totally fine with it. So yeah, so to then like interrupt that, like, the zen of like watching a thing happen, to be like hit triangle and then not do it, and then just have to rewatch it until you do it.
So do you think the game would have been more satisfying if after hitting the last hit, whatever wimpy like soft throw you do, it all just does that for you? Playing devil's advocate here, like I feel like is there something climactic about being involved in the final blow versus?
I'll give you the tapping O button to pull the Hydra's head down, but what I won't give you is every time, like in the first level, right? Watching you play it and remembering it very clearly as we were watching it. The like tapping a button to get something to pull it down or do something nasty, like pull somebody into 2 pieces, okay. But when it's like triangle, square, circle, tap triangle really fast, go back to circle, and then every time you mess up, you have to go back and watch it again and do it again. It ruined a ton of Spider-Man games. Yeah. It ruined a ton of like every time it's like there's an intricate, pattern that you have to follow. I hate. I don't mind tapping a button. I don't like jumping around.
Honestly, like I'll say it's kind of on par with like the Donkey Kong Country model of like boss fights where it's like, oh, you're at this big bad thing and all they're going to repeat are a couple of movements over and over again. If it's like, if like the argument is, well, like tapping these buttons makes you feel like it's part of the thing, well, it still cheapens the experience because gameplay wise, like it's not great. Like maybe you just have a better boss fight mechanic all around.
That's true. Yeah, I think it's more a thing of how can your gameplay feel consistently satisfying, or maybe or maybe there is like a particular action you can weave into the to the kind of cinematic part of that boss fight to make that end blow, to your point, Noah, feel satisfying. But I agree. I feel like God of War kind of kickstarted a generation's worth of like me sitting on the edge of like nervously being like anxious at every cutscene, being like, do I have to do something, or is it going to let me go? One improvement, I still think QuickTime events are bad. One improvement that the third entry did that I kind of liked was it did the buttons in the orientation of the controller on the screen. I don't know if you remember. So at the very least, my lizard brain could be like, oh, it's at the top. I'll just like hit that. And so I'm still kind of just watching the thing, and I'm not fully.
It's a little more autopilot for you there.
Yeah. And so like it's still like that's not great, but that I always remember liking that change. Also, something weird about the first God of War that I want to bring up: not that many boss fights in it. Like it opens with that big fight with the Hydra, and you're like, "All right, this is gonna be a game full of like we kill a bunch of big monsters," and then there's like 2 more bosses in the entire game.
The game does feel like one long level, not like a Metroidvania or anything where it's like one large level. It's just one long level. There's only one direction to go, and you just are constantly going in that direction.
What are the bosses? There's because the end is Ares, right?
It's Ares, and then there's just at one point when you're in the I can't remember what it's called, but the big temple that you're in that
you fight like a minotaur, right?
You fight like this big minotaur thing. Because I remember playing it the first time and getting to that boss and being like, wow, it's been a while since there's been a boss fight. I guess we're doing one now. And then the next one was Ares, and I was like, oh, the game's over. Okay. And then like later entries corrected that. I feel like they put a lot more boss fights in. But yeah, weirdly. It almost, even though it's not like, it feels like it's not a movie, but it feels like that game almost blew its production budget on that opening, on like the opening Hydra fight, and they were like, okay, we can't afford that many more of these. We don't know if this is going to work.
All right. Well, guys, we're already getting into it. We still have some rankings to do. So this is how this is going to work. We haven't
Crazy
even touched
Taxi, favorite game.
We haven't even touched. Yeah, we only haven't touched on Crazy Taxi. We haven't touched really on ET.
Yeah. Well, that's because we all know where it's going. It's the bottom of a pit.
So we'll talk a little about those as we rank them. But this is how it's going to work. Before you guys see the list, you're not comparing them to each other. I want you guys to score each one between 0 and 10. You can use decimals, but you can't use the same number twice in perpetuity for any episode moving forward. Means once you've given something a rank, something else will always have to be higher or lower. So from there, we will take our averages, see where it ranks, and decide if that is what we are happy with or if we need to make our adjustments. So let's go into ET. And I wanted to say, like, yes, this is a trash game. It's not necessarily the game that killed Atari, but to the rest of the world, it might as well have been. I also think it's a game that you absolutely need the manual to play because it does nothing to teach you how to play, and it's impossible to know what to do without it. I have scored this at a 3. How do you guys feel about ET?
Sorry, a 3?
This is in perpetuity. You can't use any score twice. Are you telling me that like you think there is no other games below
But you just blew your 3. You didn't even do like a 2.99 or
I'm curious
we're starting from somewhere.
I'm curious what you're going to give it 2 or 1.
I was going to say 3 myself for ET. Like that's very much where I was at too. I get it's a famously bad game, but it is a game that has like a concept that was like a little bit more involved than like most Atari games were, and like what you had to do. It was poorly executed, but like it was there.
It's a bad game. Is it the worst game? No, I don't think it is. I think it's just a bad game.
Core concept more complex than Nights into Dreams.
Complexity does not mean good.
No.
I'm just saying though, but like it's there. Like it's got a thing that it was trying to do.
Well, Pat, where are you putting this? You seem so hurt.
I'm going to put it at a 0.1.
Point
0.1. Yeah.
All right, you are going real low on this.
I think it was damn near unplayable.
It is pretty. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I would say, as someone who loves like behind the scenes kind of intrigue on a lot of different things, the story of how the ET game was made is interesting to me. Basically, the guy in charge of it was given like 5 weeks due to Atari being like horribly like disorganized and paying way too much money for the license. So I'm gonna give it 1.5. One, because I think the game is terrible and like honestly, even if the concept is admirable, like it's just not fun. And ultimately, if I'm playing a game, it's to be fun to play, and I'm not having fun. I won't give it less than a 1 because it doesn't make me angry. Like there's nothing truly despicable about the game itself. And then I'll add that 0.5 on because it's impressive that the guy made a game in 5 weeks that didn't just like spontaneously combust when it was put in the system. So like and you know, as someone who manages like software development, like I feel for somebody who was given such a horrible job. So I have to be a little bit generous there, but I can't go higher than that.
All right. Next up, guys, we'll do Duck Hunt. Louis, start with you. What are you giving Duck Hunt?
All right.
Keeping in mind, you gave ET a 3. So anything below that means you officially think Duck Hunt is worse than ET.
Can I modify my ET to a 2.95? I don't want to give it a full 3 because there's cops in the games, and even though the cops aren't the one that take you to jail.
Yeah, scientists take you to jail and cops take your phone away from you. Okay, maybe.
It's still in there. And I'm going to set as canon right now. I'm going to refuse to rate any game with cop activity above a 3, no matter how good the game is.
We better not talk about Resident Evil.
Fair point.
Duck Hunt, I'm gonna give that a 6.5.
6.5. Okay. Patrick.
I'm gonna give it a 7.4.
A 7.4. Wow.
It just was like
generous.
I loved the light gun. I loved playing 2-player. I think it was actually a very brilliant game with very interesting mechanics at a time when tech was like way behind. So
could have said the same thing about ET.
And to that point though, are there games on this you're going to rate below the 7.5 or 7.4?
Yeah.
You're going to say this is the case, and then is every other game better and therefore in the 8 or higher range, or are there games you are officially saying Duck Hunt is a better game then?
I mean, I'm pretty okay with it because to me, it's about like the game as it was at its release, how much good times I got out of it, and how much of a game it was. Like, I think that's my thinking. So yeah,
so it puts it at more of an advantage because you've played it before doing it for this podcast.
Favorite movie is Birth of a Nation. He only holds it to the standard at what it was at the time, and nothing since then.
Pretty sure people knew that was still dog shit.
That is on record and officially part of the list.
That's going to be the opening clip.
Tro, Duck Hunt, what do you think?
I'm struggling a little bit because I want to be mindful of other scores I'm going to give out, but I also kind of have to be honest about how I feel like this game stacked up, even at the time in which I played it. Because, like, let's be honest, the zapper didn't function very well, even as intended, like when you played it back in the late '80s. So I'm going to give it a 5. I think it's charming in terms of like its graphical aesthetic and like the music and stuff like that. And I think there will always be memories I will treasure about it. But even in its intended function when it came out, I don't think it actually works that well. So I can't go above that.
All right.
I like on a 0.0 to a 10.0 scale. Now, what you are saying definitively is that like
this is
Duck Hunt is the neutral game. Like it is
the medium level
for whether anything is good or bad.
Which, yes, that does mean going forward in anything you are on for this podcast, you are saying that every other game is either above or below average. There is no true average. but Duck Hunt.
The true average is Duck Hunt.
Also, I want
now-
to point something out. Duck Hunt came out 2 years after ET, so like you're talking about like that is it was
Yeah,
19.
and that was like
fucking
Nintendo
four.
R&D 1 or whatever, the same people who made Super Mario Brothers.
Yes.
They like yeah, Super Mario Brothers is I think still a playable game if showing its age a little bit. More so than Duck Hunt, which I feel like didn't even, one game revolutionized what like video games could be to some degree, and another one is a light gun game that is charming but didn't even work that well the time it came out. So
Yeah, whatever.
All right.
I feel fair rating it where I left it.
Well,
Mhm.
next up, I gave Duck Hunt a 4. That's where I was feeling with it. I honestly, it's like it's fine, but there's not much to it. It is a pretty bare bones game. Even that's why it was paired with Mario, because it was a bare bones game that you would get some action out of, like Animal Crossing. Maybe you get a half hour of it at a time, except there's no reason to go back to it.
The one thing I will say,
I think some
though,
people put a
is
lot
that-
more than a half hour into Animal Crossing.
Some people here. The one thing I will say though is that like, so like at a bar that we've all been to, right? They used to have a regular Nintendo system sitting there at the bar, and like anytime I was there, what I would want to play is Duck Hunt. Like if I was there, like it wasn't Mario or Bible Adventures or any of the other cartridges that were there. Like, and I think that accounts for something in a game.
True, but I don't think. But then I don't want to own it. I want to go to someone else's place and play it as part of a much larger thing I am doing.
Well,
I mean, it's not my
are-
attraction.
Are arcade games going to be considered like in this conversation?
Oh,
of things?
100%.
Like,
I mean, we're
Okay,
going to talk
because-
about one in a second.
But there are plenty of arcade games that I'm also going. I would also wish I had that machine in my home.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's fair, because if it's like we're talking ownership, you can't, some things you can't hold. You can't hold certain arcade games, baby.
Some are more of a concept than an actual game, really.
right.
All right,
We'll talk
next
about that
up,
in a minute too.
yeah, next up, Pat, we're going to start with you for Sonic the Hedgehog.
Original Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm gonna pull a Tro and I'm gonna give it a 5. Because I think that is my true average.
This
for
is
a game.
the averagest of average games.
Yes.
Sega
Yeah.
classic, beloved by millions. Sonic the Hedgehog. You are officially saying, on record, it is average.
The OG Sonic is my midpoint. That is my is it better or worse than game that I will weigh all other games against.
Fair enough. Tro, why was Pat wrong?
That's wrong because he should have given it one less point, which is a 4, which is what I'm giving Sonic the Hedgehog. Because unlike Duck Hunt, which even though I don't think it's a great game, it didn't make me mad like Sonic the Hedgehog did. And I think because the promise of what I think can be a legit fun game is so squandered, I'm punishing Sonic the Hedgehog a bit more than maybe it deserves. But I think that's, for me, that's such an egregious misstep of game design that I'm going to give it, that I'm going to dock some points and give what might be like a 6-level game a 4.
Interesting. So I actually had I had a lot of shit to say on this podcast about Sonic. Nothing has been favorable yet, but I will say I still have fun when I play it, even though there's plenty of problems. I give it a 6.5. I gave it a 6.5 because in the end, it's not the best platformer. I don't think it's as good as everyone remembers. I don't think it deserves millions of awful DeviantArt pictures, but I do think it's a fun game. At the very least, the first game, and be honest, the music rocks. Green Hill Zone is still a fucking jam, no matter what.
Yes.
And Casino,
Which is Sonic 2, but yes.
no, there's the casino level in
There's
Sonic 1.
Spring Yard.
Spring Yard. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's all there's a casino level in every fucking Sonic game.
That is true. or Carnival,
Louis,
whatever.
what are you giving Sonic?
I'm gonna give Sonic a 4.29.
4.29. True spirit.
That 4.3 is going to be reserved for Sonic Spinball.
Oh my god. I can't wait to talk about
Oh,
Sonic Spitball someday.
That'll be the one long form game we do. Just
Skyrim versus Sonic Spinball.
Two games that truly felt like anything was possible.
All right. Well, Tro, we're going to kick it off with you now for Super Mario World.
Oh boy, Super Mario World. We didn't actually talk about it that much.
Truly did not. For a
we
game that's
all-
probably going to rank pretty high.
Yeah,
But-
we talked about it in relation to Sonic.
Right.
So yeah,
So-
so where do you stand with it?
But I will say, I think part of that is because I don't need to spend a lot of time explaining why Super Mario World is good. It's, I think still a masterpiece of platformer design. I think there are certain aspects of Super Mario World that Nintendo still hasn't been able to match in terms of the explorable overworld, in terms of just little nuances in the soundtrack, like the fact that when you jump on Yoshi, the soundtrack changes and like incorporates itself like with additional instrumentation. Like they're just so there. It's such a rich experience, and I think is a retro gaming experience that even newcomers now can still very easily jump into. Um, I'm not inclined to say that any game is perfect, and I do believe Mario World gets off to a slow start. And I do think that with the cape you can fly over a bunch of levels and not actually engage with the level design. So I will give it a 9.
A 9.
Yes.
All right, ranking it
I
real high, Pat.
I just heard a list that ranked it as the best game of all time. So I'm not
It-
surprised.
Yeah, people can make that argument.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna come in at an 8.8 because even though I didn't want it when I was a kid, that's the game that my Super Nintendo came with, and the ability to like find that there was a secret path that would appear if you did a certain thing in the level. Actually, what Lewie was talking about with Goldeneye earlier, like that was a little bit of that, like, oh wow, like if you go backwards at the start of the level, you'll find something different, or if you have already hit the red switch, you'll find a box that you can jump off of and like do something different, or you could leave the haunted house in a different way to get like that kind of stuff was really fascinating to me as a kid, and it's just brilliant, great game design. So yeah.
Louis.
I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna say 8.7.
8.7.
My thing is like if we're talking like side scrolling, like 2D platformers, maybe like a 10 for me. But like when we're ranking it against all games of all time, like the perfect platformer is still not going to be my favorite game ever, just because of like my game biases and what I like. That's not what I'm going to spend the most time doing. So even though like I will admit it's almost like flawless in its execution of the genre, that genre is just not my favorite thing. So like it gets a very high score, but it can't be the highest for me personally.
I think that's perfectly fine. I'm actually, I guess I'm shocked, but maybe not really that I'm the outlier here. I give it a 7.8. Still high, still respectable, but again, there's just so many games that will be on this list. Every game ever will be on this list. And I can't guarantee that there aren't at least that many that go above it. So now I know the one that we're all waiting for, the one we are super excited for because we've spent so much time on it. Nights into Dreams. I'm going to go first because I think I may have actually ended up ranking this the highest out of all four of us, but we'll see.
And Patrick probably gave it something.
And that I gave it a 6.6.
Wow.
Because here's the thing. In the end, playing it what it is, which is gameplay more akin to something like Crazy Taxi than I think something like Sonic. In that it is a course, it is more or less a flying obstacle course. You're trying to go around and beat your own time in. It is shitty to control. It is impossible to figure out what it is you're supposed to do without some sort of instructions. But once you figure that out, it's fine. It's 100% fine and like nothing more, nothing less. I actually enjoyed it more than I enjoyed replaying Sonic, at least 0.10 points more. So that's where I'm putting it. Louis, why am I wrong?
Well, so here's the thing. I didn't get the time to figure out. I played it for one night on a noche, and I'm still fine with it. I'm fine with being ignorant about whether or not this game.
I will say for the record, I gave you more opportunities to come back and try playing it.
You sure did, and I still didn't want to. I don't want to know. I'm all right with it. I think again, in the same way that like just like a platformer is not going to be like the thing for me, like a thing that's kind of like a rail platformer, like it's going to like rank even further down for me. I'm giving Nights a what did I give ET? A 2.95? I'm giving Knights a 2.94.
Wow.
I would have more of an interest in trying to sit down and actually beat ET, frustrating gameplay and all, than I ever am in revisiting Knights and trying to get through the whole game.
All right, Pat, it's redemption time. Why
Man,
is
I
Louis
really-
wrong?
I really want to give it a 6.66 because I feel like that's just the comedy that you missed. But I'm gonna crack it off at a 4.99.
All right.
Because Sonic was a little bit more formative. This is my average point now. It was a little bit more formative and a little bit more of like a thing that like changed the way I approached gaming. Also, I owned Sonic and I played it relentlessly as a kid. So
did I. It doesn't mean I like it now.
I still think it's just, I don't know. It's interesting. But Knights, what I was like really into about Knights was how much it kind of broke the rules. Even the fact that you turn back into the kid and you can run in a different way, like your control scheme changes. That's kind of wild. And the alarm clock chasing you and shit. Like, so it still was. Yeah, it still was a. It's a good game that did a thing, and like people are always clamoring to have it remade, and I am curious to see if that happens, what it would be like. So yeah.
Petro?
So this also falls into the category of games that made me mad while I was playing it. So I can't in good conscience rank it above Sonic the Hedgehog because that game infuriated me, but I felt like it was easier to understand its mechanics. The fact that I felt forced to read 17 pages of how to play in order to even understand the basics of this game, and even then didn't beat a single boss fight because they are frustratingly on a timer. So if you do something wrong for like a short time, you can't make up that time and then you lose and have to start all over. I would give it a 3, and I'm going to tack on 0.5 on the end because of how imaginative the design is. And I know Japanese drug laws are strict, but Yuji had to be taking something because I don't know where those visions are coming from. But it's certainly something. I'd be curious to see a remake to see if they could iron out a lot of like those ideas and focus them into something that works a lot better. Maybe with proper 3D movement this time, because that was also frustrating that you were in like weird lanes that you switch between. But yeah, I'm gonna say 3.5.
I do think it was a better representation of dreams than Inception. I will go on record saying
That I will agree with.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Louis.
Okay. Can you remind me my other scores again real quick?
I will tell you if you're about to use one. There's enough number options here that.
Okay. Yeah, it's my fault for not writing them down.
And you can find out when we review these at the end.
Okay. All right. I'm just firing from the hip. I'm gonna give Castlevania a flat 7. It was really good. Like at the time, there are a lot of things that I'm super grateful like that it did. I could still go back and play it, even though there are ones that I probably want to do more. Bottom line.
Fair enough. Patrick, you played it for the first time. You don't seem to have a lot of experience with this, but we're going to have you offset all of our scores as equal. Because you're here, and this is the podcast.
You know what? I will give Symphony of the Night a 6.66 for the comedy, but also I see what it did. I've enjoyed other games. Like when we were playing it, I was talking about Shadow of the Colossus. No, not Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow Complex. Yes. The other like modern age Metroidvania that I really enjoyed. But it was a Metroidvania.
Well, I mean, a different game from Shadow of the Colossus. That was the reach.
Yes. But the like core concepts and stuff are really cool. I like that it was an experience-based system with like different equipment and stuff that you could get. But I just always really hated. I've never liked the Castlevania or a Ghouls and Goblins or Ghosts and Goblins or any of the things where like a side-scrolling game that you have to attack with like melee weapons. Never been my thing. I always get frustrated. I always feel like the enemies are just better and can move more fluidly, and like you're just some stiff cardboard man that like can only do so many things. It was never my thing.
For all the listeners out there, we watched him play this last night. He got fucked up by those Medusa heads.
Well,
real
yes.
quick.
That's
Real
a
quick.
struggle shared across all Castlevania games. So don't feel too bad about that.
It's true. And again, like anything where your sides, because even the original Castlevania, like I always felt like, or Altered Beast, so many of those games, it always felt like the enemies could do so much more than you could do and move so much more like in different directions and stuff. And you're just forced to either walk, duck, and like aim forward or up.
Fair enough. Tro, I feel like, again, you and I could talk about this for its own podcast for at least an hour or so. So recognizing we have some games left to go through,
Yeah.
what are you giving this?
I feel very conflicted about my score because I think it technically maybe deserves, from thinking about the time in which it came out, a higher score than I'm going to give it. But I need to consider all the factors, and also the fact that like I can't ignore the fact that people found ways to improve upon this formula. And I would also say that when it comes to Metroidvanias from the 90s, I would rank Super Metroid higher than this if it were in contention. And I will also contend that this is maybe a low bar to clear, but it was by far the most fluid movement in the Castlevania game at this time. Alucard moved way more fluidly than any of the Belmonts did. Which again, that more exemplifies how stiff that movement was more than anything. I'm going to say 7.5, only because I think that end game is so weak that it prohibits me from refinishing the game when I replay it. I could easily play the first 2/3 of that game like very easily, and I don't find that end part pleasurable, and so I'm going to, especially in the interest of thinking of other games I might put above it, I will go with the lower score on that spectrum and say 7.5.
All right. I probably beat this game 100% every 2 years. Just like clockwork. Honestly, around every 2 years, I think I come back to this game, play it from scratch, and beat it. It's one of the few games I have bought for multiple systems. I'm giving it a 9. I think there are a few games that maybe then when I play it I like more, but there are very few games that I ever come back to like this that I want to repeat play more than this one. But that's me. What's also me is Goldeneye 007. I gave a 6. It's never been my thing. It's fun. I enjoy the multiplayer, but yeah, I don't think I ever really understood. I never really got into it in the same way. Maybe because I always sucked at it. But in general, the controls even then were dog shit. Rather play Quake. Tro, what'd you give it?
You know what? I might be in line with you and also say 6, because
Right.
any game, and unfortunately this is going to be true for most first-person games, but any game that makes me physically ill is going to have a ceiling in terms of what rating it can get. And it's not necessarily the game's fault; it's my poor brain's fault that it can't handle it. But it's one of those things where I feel like especially my memories and like fun that I can have playing in multiplayer, I would probably give it like an 8. And even though there are things about the single player campaign and the fact that it has a single player campaign that I find very interesting, in terms of like functionality, yeah, especially thinking about like the technical issues and the control issues and stuff like that, I have to dock it. And even other first person shooters that I have less like nostalgia for are probably objectively better games, so I can't go higher than 6.
All right, Patrick.
I think I'm gonna come in here and say 8.9, because
8.9.
if I think about things in my life that have brought me joy and how much joy they've brought, I think Goldeneye's like up in that list of just life things that I've like enjoyed, and because of it existing, have like had such a good time, throughout such a long period of my life. And Louis was saying earlier, like the different objectives, the being able to find something, being able to like see somebody like sitting on a toilet, like because that's where they like decided to have the character, and unless you like entered that room you would never know it. Shooting people's hats off, like just all that kind of that like rich, deep thing for a movie port. Like I just
So
yeah,
so
I really,
so GoldenEye is a better game than Super Mario World.
I mean, for me and from my perspective, I'm gonna say yeah. And I put it just a hair above it, but I mean, really, it just if Super Mario World had had a multiplayer that I had loved so much or something, maybe it would have been up there. But yeah, we're
Can I
unlockables.
amend my score slightly based on something Patrick said?
You okay?
Louis and I, yeah, I'm good. Thrown in the toilet. Louis and I once during a mushroom trip played GoldenEye,
I was
and
gonna bring that up.
and I laughed so hard that I can't deny the level of joy. I'm going to give it 6.3. I'm going to up it a couple decimals.
6.3.
Just for that, because that you're talking about joy, Patrick, and that I still remember that. So
Nice.
Louis?
I'm not going to go as high as Patrick, but similar to like there's like GoldenEye has like such a playfulness to it that like when it could have been delivered like very like self-seriously, and I mean in the same way that Rare did with like Perfect Dark later on as well, where like pretty serious game, but there's a lot of like silliness that they just like put into it that I think like not too many games, a lot of games don't really like walk that like balance super well. And yeah, this one gets an elevated score for me because like emotionally yeah, there's a lot. I played this one a lot like with my family and stuff like that. And I think yeah, imperfect game, but it's a lot of fucking fun. Like I've spent more time playing it than other things, so what does that mean? I'm gonna give it an 8.3 8.4 8.34
8.34. Perfect.
starting to get real granular.
So you
We've got a lot of
believe
games to cover.
you believe that Super Mario World is a better game, whereas Patrick believes it is a worse game.
Yes.
All right. The next one's going to be interesting. We haven't talked about this yet. Crazy Taxi. What I find especially interesting about this is I think between the four of us, we played 3 different versions. Now, I played the Dreamcast version. And based on what I played, I really like Crazy Taxi a lot. I actually had not gotten to play it before other than occasionally in the arcade. I like the fact that the Dreamcast version has 2 levels in various modes within each level, and then a crazy box level of just various like fun challenges and stuff to do. In the same way that I docked Duck Hunt for having a low like replay value, Crazy Taxi is short, not a lot of progression, and I kept wanting to go back over and over for one more score. I gave it a 7.3 for the Dreamcast version. Tro, what version did you play?
I played the iOS version, but I did have I have a backbone controller. It's like basically kind of turns your phone into a switch almost, so like it attaches to either side. So I did play with button control rather than touch or tilt or anything like that.
And I believe you also had widescreen on that too because of the phone.
It does have widescreen. Otherwise, it's a faithful port. It has the original soundtrack. It doesn't have the brand stuff though, so I was going to generic fried chicken restaurants and generic pizza places instead of like Pizza Hut or KFC.
So no Tower Records, no Pizza Hut,
no Tower Records,
no Levi's.
Yes, no Levi's. But I did get to listen to all 4 songs on that soundtrack over and over again because I'm pretty sure it's just 2 Offspring songs and 2 Bad Religion songs or whatever. Or at least that's what it sounded like to me, but maybe I'm not a connoisseur. I heard that Sum of One and Dead in 2010 song like 1,000 times, but I heard it that many times because I played it a lot. I will say it has that addictive arcade quality to it, and it does make you want to. Even if I found that crazy voice to be a little dismissive of my B rank, which I felt very proud of achieving, and said I was still playing it safe, and I definitely am holding it against it for that. But I had fun with it. I paid $2 to get it without ads on the iOS store, and you know what? I had definitely at least $2 worth of fun with that game, if not more, which is like pouring 8 quarters in to the arcade, which I would do in an arcade machine as well. So I'm going to say I can't go too high with it, but I will give it a oh boy, am I going to rank it higher than GoldenEye? Maybe.
Are you?
I'll give it a 6.
Are you?
I'll give it a 6.2. I'll put it just under GoldenEye because GoldenEye wins out for nostalgia value. But it's fun. Crazy Taxi is a fun game. It's a fun arcade game. There's not much to it. I couldn't figure out the stupid ramp jump mini game.
Yeah,
to save my
same.
life. But yeah,
That pissed me off.
You know, yeah, it's a fun game.
All right, Patrick, which version?
I have the Dreamcast version. I also had the GameCube version. But yeah, the Dreamcast version is the one that I had the most time with. And yeah, I mean, I loved it. It's a fun game. It's another one that's like, it's not necessarily a party game where you're playing with multiple people, but it is one of those ones that like you sit with a crowd and like pass between different challenges and try it over and over again. I mean, it's still going to be a kind of low rating because the game that I loved that did this was Simpsons Hit and Run. But
who got sued, I believe,
by Crazy Taxi?
Oh, really?
No, they got sued by Sega for aping too much on their gameplay.
I don't blame them because
they
it
settled
was
in
a lot.
court.
Yeah. But I'm gonna come in with I'll do a 5.5.
A 5.5. Okay.
Yeah. It's a good fun game, but at its core, like also driving games aren't often going to be that high up for me. But it's a good fun time.
Lewie, what's your experience on this one? Which one?
I mean, I was arcade first and foremost, and then I had it on the GameCube as well, which unfortunately paying a GameCube price for it was when I was like, this is too much now for the experience. But that said, no, I fully agree with everybody where it definitely like it hits all the right notes. I mean, as embarrassing as it is to say too, though, I think like it's one of those video games that was like aesthetically so cool at the time. Like it really like had a particular place and like what was for a certain group of people hip, right? Like, at that point in time, which like, you know, in the same way that we might get embarrassed by like how much we assumed a cultural identity around a particular Tony Hawk's game. Like it meant a lot to people, maybe still does if you're wearing like a yellow bucket hat. I don't know. This is also tough because like it was a lot of fun at the arcade, but my favorite arcade game of all time is Police Trainer, which I now can't give any higher than a 3.0.
Do the cops in Time Crisis count, Louis?
Oh, fuck me.
What about Area 51?
Welcome to the conundrum, folks.
But okay, so this is going to be the first and only time that I'm going to contradict myself in anything I've said previously. I'm going to rate it higher despite it not being my absolute favorite arcade game and say that it's like it's a good like 5.6. It's on the good side of things, but not like
5.6. All right. So bonus round real quick, because we all played different versions. They're different enough. They all get their own space. So Lou, we'll start with you. Knowing that the arcade version only had one level, was it what, maybe 50 cents, maybe $1 to play,
right,
but you got to sit down, you got the full screen, the full experience in front of you.
Right, surround sound.
Would you rate a Dreamcast version with an extra level, but the safety of your own home and a controller in hand, higher or lower?
No, arcade's got the best value for the money that you put into it. Even if you're paying $15, you've already paid too much for the replay value of Crazy Taxi. So arcade, as it is in that one thing, for me is going to get the highest score.
So if you had a rough guess at the Dreamcast version, based on that knowledge.
Okay, I'm going to say it then slips into the less great side of things. I'm gonna give it a 4.9.
It's essentially the same game. Are you saying just the fact that because of the cost of the game drops it that much lower?
It's not. It doesn't have the same replayability that like a sport like an NFL Blitz or like an NBA Jam ported to like a console has. Like the idea of mastering the game doesn't or maintaining doesn't work in the same way for me that like some other arcade to console games do. And I think the value's depreciated then when you have to stack it up against like a sit down play sort of thing. So,
got it. So then where would you put, let's say, paying $2 for it, but you have to smudge the screen with your fingers?
That
However, that
honestly,
screen is significantly wider, but you lose Pizza Hut, you lose Tower Records, you lose Levi's. These things never existed.
you know what? I honestly think maybe it's a better use for something like that. Like that is the power of technology, is that we can port some of these things. You pay $2 once and then you've got it all the way through. That seems like the ultimate value for a game that was at the base designed to just like suck quarters out of your pocket. So I'm gonna give it a 0.01 higher than than what did I do 5.4? Is that what I said?
You did 5.6 for
Oh, 5.6.
arcade.
Okay, well then yeah, then let me do 5.61 for iOS. Honestly, if it plays the exact same, I like that idea. I might go get it right now.
All right, Pat, you played the Dreamcast version. Same questions about arcade and mobile.
So I'll go arcade 5.51 to put it just a hair above my Dreamcast rating, because the feel of the arcade machine was a really good arcade machine. I liked the steering wheel vibrated, right, when you would like hit things, and it really,
yeah.
the haptic sort of experience of doing it was great. If I had that game in like a basement of a house that I, or an Airbnb or something like that, I would probably play it for an hour or two just because of how enjoyable it was. And iOS, I'm actually gonna go a hair lower. I'll do a 5.49 because I have it on iOS. I played it some. I just never really love smudging the screen with my thumbs. It's not a thing that I enjoy puzzle games and stuff on my phone, but I'm not big on like things that I have to use like a toggle.
Yeah,
So
stop having greasy thumbs. That's not the game's fault.
I keep sticking them in pizza pies, just like jamming them in there.
Just to see how warm they are, just if they're ready. Tro, you played mobile, Dreamcast, and arcade. What are your thoughts?
I think, let's see. I
Gave mobile a
made crazy
6.2.
text. I did give it a 6.2. I would give, so for arcade, I agree with folks that the kind of immersiveness of the experience when it comes to kind of being in that seat with the steering wheel and the music blaring and all that stuff is fun even. And honestly, the two levels are, it's like two different iterations on San Francisco. It's hard to say that they're like radically different, but they are different. So I would say I'm going to rank it slightly lower. I'm going to say 6.1 only because the iOS version I have forever, and this I would have to keep paying for every time I'm playing it. And because I suffer from some social anxiety, I would be self-conscious about people watching me play if I weren't in the privacy of an Airbnb I, like Patrick, specifically rented to play Crazy Taxi in. So I put it there. And then Dreamcast, I like the Dreamcast controller, and I like Dreamcast for arcade games. Odds are if I bought it for Dreamcast, it would be more expensive, so I'll give it a solid 6.
6. All right. If I played Dreamcast, I gave it a 7.3. I think, honestly, I would have paid for the price of the game instead of having to pay every time to play. I gave the arcade 7.25, and I gave mobile a full 7 because I like being able to play it on a bigger screen. Simple as that. Sure. Next, God of War. God of War, the original God of War. I've been going in order a certain way, and I've been losing track now. So I'm going to start with myself here and say I gave God of War an 8. I think it's still a good game, and it's still an epic game, but it is not without its faults. I think you're right, Patrick. The quick times are a bit too much. I personally hate the anti-hero aesthetic that was huge during that time, where everyone was just a dick and we were rewarding them for that. That is just not my style. And like just the sex quick time event alone was just uncomfortable. Like, we don't need to have that for the sake of that is the epitome of like the Jerry Springer era of media being like, isn't this cool? Like, no. In the same way we didn't need BMXXX, we don't need this.
So you unlocked boobs in that game.
Right. Or like the Man Show. It's all from the same era and it's all problematic. So, but that's a very small scene in what is otherwise a very fun game to play. Tro, God of War.
Yeah, I'm torn on a lot of these, but I feel like a lot of the points you raised about it being kind of cringy to go back to due to the kind of residual early to mid 2000s embarrassments of its aesthetic. I'm gonna give it a, let's see. Well, now part of me regrets giving Symphony of the Night the score I did because I think this game is not as good as that. But I will give this a 7.4. I think Symphony of the Night is better. I think this game is still fun. I think the sequels are better. I think 2 and 3, as far as like I never played Ascension, but 2 and 3, I think as like classic style God of War games are better versions of this. And I think this game deserves a lot of credit for kind of pioneering the style, for better and worse in terms of trends that it started. But it was certainly notable upon its release. The kind of arcadey character action type combat in this is still very fun. My lizard brain still kind of responds to that kind of building up your combo counter and doing your finishing moves. I think that even though they don't add a lot of depth, I think that the sequels added a little bit more to it and were more creative in their set pieces and had more boss fights that I think I have to give them some space. So 7.4.
7.4. All right. Lewie.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a very edgy 6.9.
6.9.
Yeah,
Nice.
In that, right, like there are some cringy parts. I don't remember it like super well. I do remember loving 2 like a whole lot more. And I'm definitely and I'll also just trust Petro in terms of like third-person action games on like what which ones are.
I'm leaving space for Dante's Inferno to take the
top. Like if anybody's going to be able to like drop knowledge on it, I know it's him. And like that's I get that it did a lot. It definitely influenced a lot of games that I loved like a lot, and I had fun when I played it through like the first time. So yeah.
All right, Patrick.
I'm so pissed because I was going to give it a 6.9420 to try to capture the comedy. And I feel like Lewie beat me to half of that punch.
You can't end a percentage on a 0. Just be a 6.942. Mathematically.
Not nearly as funny. Yeah. Okay, well then fine. I'll give it a 4.2 or 4.2069.
Okay, so you are officially saying it is worse than Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, I am. Because you know what? It's getting docked because of the fucking QuickTime events. You saw how angry I was about that. Otherwise, a really phenomenal game, but it ruined so many games after it. So yeah.
I like how you were prepared to give it an almost 7, and instead you gave it a barely 4.
It is.
Yep.
It is. According to Patrick, God of War is a worse game than Crazy Taxi, GoldenEye, Symphony of the Night, Nights into Dreams.
Yep.
It's actually outside of ET. It is his worst rated game on this list.
Yep. Symphony of the Night, a game he played a little bit last night.
Yep.
And not only that, you are going to use the 4.2069 joke here immediately on this game.
I mean, in the same way. In the same way, it pulled out all the stops and but it at least made QuickTime events so popular. It definitely also had an icky sort of following with the anti-hero stuff that you were talking about hating so much. Like, I definitely remember, like, yeah, the poorly crafted 3D boobs in this certainly came back a lot in games that emulated this sort of play style.
I hit return. It is locked in.
All right,
what are you gonna rate Conker's Bad Fur Day?
10. I'm pulling my 10 for. No, I'm kidding. That's not on record.
Yeah, it's recorded.
No, furries are hot. It's cool.
Then I think you would have liked Sonic more.
Star Fox Adventures 9.9.
I mean, we haven't gotten to that. That's its own episode. Fantastic game. WarioWare. Pat, we're going to start with you. You're rolling hot right now. Last game on the list here. WarioWare.
WarioWare. I'm going to get. I haven't given anything my 7 yet, have I? I'm gonna
You've
give
only- you've-
WarioWare.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you've only
Yes.
given it a 7.4. Nothing
Yeah,
says it's a
7.
flat 7.
That WarioWare deserves a flat 7. It's an excellent party game. It did not exist as a single player thing really, but yeah, I think that it definitely was a great time, a lot of fun. It was very frantic. I enjoy that kind of fun. So
All right, Tro.
I guess similarly, I'm filling a quota for a number range I haven't used yet. I'm going to give WarioWare an 8.1.
8.1.
Maybe I'm been flexing my Nintendo bias a little bit on some of this list, but I really do think when you think about a game that kind of accomplishes what it sets out to do, I think WarioWare is very really captures that in terms of both repurposing the gameplay of the original Game Boy Advance game and kind of WarioWare, just kind of how remarkable WarioWare is as of itself, and kind of inventing in some way the kind of like simplicity that we now see in like a lot of mobile games and like things like that. I think there's just a lot you could unpack with more time on kind of how novel WarioWare was. And as a party game, I think it's one of my favorites. It doesn't come with a lot of the kind of, as much as I love like Mario Party and stuff like that, it doesn't really come with the same like rage-inducing friendship ending elements that a lot of competitive multiplayer games really have. I feel like because your actions are so individualized in each game, it's mostly on you to perform them well. And it's harder to, as much as I loathe to see Dr. Krygor take the victory at every survival fever, and he'll weigh in next, I'm sure. But I really like this game a lot, and I think I can't go higher than that because as a single player experience, it's non-existent, and I think it only really thrives in its intended environment. But I think that's what it was made for, and it does it really well.
All right. I think it is. Yeah. I mean, looking at what an 8.10, I think the only thing you've rated higher than this is Super Mario World.
Mm-hmm.
Lewie, WarioWare.
Let's see. I'm gonna rank it highly. I've got this thing. Maybe it speaks to like my ADHD nature, but like where I like don't like to watch movies a ton because like I find them like a hard thing to focus on. But I can watch like a TV show and then end up watching like more episodes of it that like span a longer time than like the movie would be, right? And I feel that way about like WarioWare, where it's like I could play 10 seconds of like balloon fight or something like that inside of that game for a lot longer than I could sit down and play that game as a single entity. And like that's sort of what it does really well, is just take like the prime part of something and like hit the part in my brain that really loves it, and that's it. And I think that's really rad. I also enjoy it as a single player experience just for like the how much faster can it get and how many games can you get through in a way that like an arcade experience doesn't normally work for me in a home system. That's one where I like it triggers me to be like, yeah, like let me push myself and see like how much better I can do at something like that. So I'm gonna give it a chaotic and confusing 8.4267.
8.4267.
Yes.
Above Goldeneye, under Super Mario World.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of right there in your second slot. All right. I gave it a solid 7.5. Like, it's a great game. I love it. I still go back to play it. I think it's one of those great games. It's fun. During the pandemic, doing it over Parsec was fantastic. I just prefer epic sprawls with big stories and stuff. Otherwise, if they made a WarioWare that just like was a pure like Homer's Odyssey epic, like straight up like giant story, span the globe, AAA title, it'd probably be my number 10. But they have yet to do that. Nintendo, call me. But I think until we're there, this is the apex of what a WarioWare can get. So that's everything. So guys, I'm going to go ahead. We've got our rankings here. For those of you listening at home, this is the order, starting from bottom to the top, the official order of the list. E.T., Nights into Dreams, Sonic the Hedgehog,
I have to see which versions of Crazy Taxi. 'Cause now we have 3 versions on here. Crazy Taxi for the Dreamcast, Crazy Taxi for mobile, Crazy Taxi for arcade, God of War, Goldeneye, the number 4 slot, Castlevania Symphony of the Night in the number 3, WarioWare in the number 2, and Super Mario World in the number 1 slot. Guys, first off, are you okay with this list? Does this list make sense to you? Are there any scores? You can't change an overall score. You could change your own score once to mitigate something's place on the list if you find it unfair.
I'm gonna lower my Castlevania score.
You're gonna lower Castlevania.
Yeah, I gave it a 6.66 for comedy, but I'm pulling back on the comedy. I want to give it a 5.7.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is that?
I mean, I've heard a lot of us talking about like how we feel about games in particular ourselves personally, and I really do hate the like side-scrolling melee attacks, and those Medusa heads really pissed me off. So yeah, I'm gonna reflect it more personally than what I think like emotional, like maybe less the grand scheme and more just what I
that
think
officially
personally.
on the list drops it down to the 4 slot. It is now Castlevania, then Goldeneye, then WarioWare, then Super Mario World. I've ranked it at a 9. I don't feel comfortable trying to undo Patrick's garbage answer, but guys, why was Patrick wrong?
I don't know if the math will work out, and I don't want to inflate my score too much. I don't really feel comfortable with Symphony of the Night being under Goldeneye because I think it's a better game than that. I'm going to bump my Symphony of the Night. I don't want this to all just be reactive, but I guess this is kind of part of the thing.
This is what we get for doing a podcast with Patrick.
Yeah, that's what did I think I was getting into? Bump me up to 7.9. I'm not going to go above that, but I think Symphony of the Night deserves better.
It does place Symphony of the Night in 3rd. Anything else? Tro, Pat, you have used your change on Symphony of the Night.
I mean, I'm honestly pretty good with where everything falls. I'm really not too mad about.
We think it's fair that we are officially saying that the world is officially saying that an iOS or Android port of Crazy Taxi is better than the original Crazy Taxi.
I think that speaks to a nature of like where technology is and how some of these sort of things work now. There's a lot of games that I think I'd look on more favorably if like they were just only like an iOS game and not like a formative like actual console thing from like the time they came up. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with the list as it is now. I did want Goldeneye to beat out Symphony of the Night, but it's fine that I used mine.
You can change your Goldeneye score.
What did I give? I gave Goldeneye an 8.9. I gave it a very high score. I think I gave it the highest score that it deserved.
Yeah. Tro, you want to change the Goldeneye score just to drop it despite Patrick?
I'm not gonna punish Goldeneye anymore. I honestly, considering my fond memories, I was probably harder on it than I needed to be, but I'm not going to change my score.
All right,
Louis, you've not changed anything right now. This
right,
is all
because I was pretty perfect in the way that I did it the first time around. It was
also,
well thought out.
To be fair, I changed my Goldeneye score kind of mid-review, so I would count that as changing it once already.
That's true. I did. I got you to bump it by being by saying how I felt, so I feel good about that. I got it. I got its bump.
All right, guys, we are locking in the list. The list is set in stone, now official, and as of right now, we, as a group, as a people, most importantly, as one world, have officially announced that Super Mario World is currently the best game of all time on this list. But there's so many more to judge, so many more to review, so many more
to put through the paces as we truly search and find out what is the best game of all time. Guys, before we log off, I don't know if anyone has the same delusions of grandeur that I do when I keep creating project after project after project, but if you want to advertise any socials or any projects you're working on, now is the time to do so. This is the obligatory spot we put that into.
I'll go first. You can just find me on Twitter at Patrick BC Molloy, and I one day hope to be famous on Twitter. So
there we go. Lewie?
You can find me up on these dating apps. My name's Lewie, Lewie. Asked about me.
and your OnlyFans. Tro?
I'm assuming we'll rate that at some point in time as well.
That's its own podcast where we just rate the greatest OnlyFans of all time.
I'm not currently maintaining a normal social media presence. Maybe if this podcast becomes a thing, I'll revisit that for the purposes of talking about video games, which I really love to do. But for now, no, I have nothing to plug at the moment.
Guys, crazy. I don't think you realize this. You have just witnessed history. Pat yourself in the backs. We had a lot of fun, doing this. We're having fun doing this. We are a little slow to get started, but by the time this airs, we should be ready for at least a monthly cadence. That's the idea right now. We're going to release these monthly. Gives us time to play the games between our various adult lives. Don't rub that in. But then if it picks up steam, if people dig it, if people are getting into it, then maybe we bump it up a little bit. Maybe we start moving to 2 times a month. We're going to play it by ear. We're going to work out the kinks. We're going to figure out what happens. But what's going to help us do that is you. Even if we are playing our podcast to an audience of 1, a review, a like, some level of interaction does actually help. I do a lot of my day job studying algorithms and numbers, and having data, having that level helps us make this a better thing. So if this is not what you want it to be, let me know. Let me know so I can adjust, so we can cater to the people who find value in this subject matter. We're excited for this. This is an adventure. This is a new journey. This is a new rebirth of myself, of the things I do, of a podcast, of what have you. I could wax poetic. I'm not going to waste your time. You're already at the end of the podcast. If you haven't turned off by now, then you're honestly probably my mom listening for the first time. So if you want to go ahead, you don't want to leave a review, you just want to talk to me directly, check me out. I am online. It is Boss Monster Kaiju. That's STA in the middle there. On Twitter, it is Boss Monster Kaiju, spelled correctly. On everything else, if you want to see the video version and are not already watching that right now, then you can check that out too on YouTube at the Boss Monster Kaiju YouTube page. Next episode, guys, we're in for a treat. I'm excited for this one. It is our first Console Wars episode, the first of what I hope to be many, where we compare and finally answer the age-old question, the one that is so important, that has haunted gamers across the world. Which Disney's Aladdin game is the better Aladdin? Until next time, stay hip, stay cool, stay heavy. Good night.